All right, hey everybody. I'm Jorge. I'm from NYU. I work in the Student Computing Services group, and we manage the Pharos service from within that group. All right. So these are the topics that I want to cover in my session today. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about our infrastructure history and some of the decisions we've made along the way. This is going to lead into discussing what we did to scale our Pharos environment to our global network university. Supporting this solution requires a lot of work, and we've developed a shared support model to help us provide this service across the university. With all the devices we have around the world, we need to be able to get metrics on them, and in this section, I'll talk about how we're addressing that. And lastly, I'm going to talk about what's working for us and what still needs improvement. So, is this session for you? I know some of you may be wondering if any of this is relevant to you. If you're responsible for providing technical assistance for or making decisions about the print management service at your institution, then this session is for you. If you're interested in providing more comprehensive support for your institution's print management solution, or if you'd just like to hear about how another institution is doing print management, then this session is for you. During the session, I'll provide you with an opportunity to learn from our experiences over the last 6 years, present a possible solution for streamlining your print management service, and demonstrate how we've made reporting work for us. Sorry, I skipped a slide. So to get us started, here are some basic facts about NYU. We have 3 degree-granting campuses located in New York, Abu Dhabi, and Shanghai. We have 11 international locations in Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe, and South America. We have over 40,000 students, and we're currently managing over 150 print devices worldwide using Pharos dedicated to student use. We've been a Pharos customer since 2009. So here's a little bit about our infrastructure history. Before we had a print management service, printing was free in our labs. We were printing about 12 million sheets per year across our 4 labs, but we had no real good way of tracking usage. We were experiencing high volumes of waste, such as paper being left on the printer or ending up in a recycling bin. People were also submitting multiple jobs to multiple printers and then grabbing the first one that came out and leaving the rest. We decided to try GoPrint PaperCut in Pharos. We obtained sample hardware to test internally as well as to put out so students could test it out as well. PaperCut didn't really meet our standards. GoPrint had an out-of-date interface for the release terminals that we weren't really thrilled with. In the end, we chose Pharos. We liked the touchscreen solution and straightforward interface. It was also already being used in our dental school and our library, and so we knew we had internal resources if we needed support. We requested RFP so we could begin deployment. So, laying down our foundation. Most of the stuff was easy to figure out. As I mentioned, the library and the dental school were already using Pharos, so we knew that there were processes in place to integrate with Blackboard and other services. We wanted to take what existed, improve it, and make it as user-friendly as possible. But how do we manage users? We have thousands of users. These users can change at any time, whether it's a new student, a new employee, or a role change. We also wanted to be supportive of our library. The library is open to non-NYU people, and as such, they're using guest printing cards to allow them to print. Though we weren't integrated with them at the time, we wanted to make sure that our systems would work. Here's a list of the items we knew we wanted and or needed for every user. We knew for sure we needed the top 4 items on the list. RFID and school affiliation would later become necessary, but not when we originally rolled out. So we worked with our identity management team to gather the data we needed from our registry. A process was set up to transfer our user feed hourly to a location on our Pharos database server using SSH SCP. We used WinSSH so we could use a shared key and the logins were automated. The files were processed and then uploaded using the userload.exe batch loader. Our Blackboard guest feed was only sent once a day, so the process was similar, but the scheduled task that processed it only ran once a day. So we have scheduled tasks set to run every time we receive a feed. The scheduled task is a Windows batch script that calls our custom PHP code. The PHP code does the following things. It initiates an ODBC connection to the database, loads a list of users not including the guest cards from the database, compares the feeds against the database to determine where there are changes, and then it creates 3 files for processing, one for adding, one for modifying, and one for deactivating users. So here's a sample of our user feed. And as you can see, there's really not that much info that we get from our identity management team. The bottom is a sample line from our processed feed. That's what's going to get loaded into Pharos. The process feed includes everything that Pharos needs to make the changes to a user. And in this case, it's just a modify, so probably just because of a card issue number. And as you can see, the purses aren't being changed. If it were to be a new user or a role change, we would be modifying the second purse to add or remove funds from it. We use the comments field to store the date of the change. We use the custom 1 field to store RFID information. And we use custom 2 to store school affiliation. Our guest card feed is always an add, so the cards go in the same way every time, but no money is ever added to those accounts. So once we had this process in place, we could really start working on our environment. We chose to go virtual. So here's some basic specs on our original environment. We decided to go into our medium security zone in our virtual infrastructure due to user data being available on the server. We went with CNAMEs to make our visible URLs clean as possible, as well as allowing us to make backend changes without having to modify our clients or our deployed Omegas. We decided to go with SSL connections between our Omegas and our servers, using our own SSL certs from VeriSign. We decided that our students would get $50 as an NYU print grant per semester, and once they had exhausted that, we would start charging their Blackboard accounts. All of our Omega PS150s were set up with swipe readers, and we ended up seeing a decrease from 12 million sheets to 7 million sheets in that first year that we deployed. But we did have some performance issues. Our processors were pegged at 100% constantly, and we needed to restart services in order to bring that down. This wasn't acceptable for us with the amount of traffic that we were seeing in our locations. So working with our support vendor and with Pharos, we determined that there was a bug in the PS150 firmware, and that when the terminals were set to DHCP, they were polling way more often than necessary and flooding our EDI server. And this was causing the processors to get pegged at 100%. A temporary workaround was hard-coding the IP address on the devices until we got a firmware upgrade. In the end, we weren't too thrilled with this, and so we started rethinking our architecture. So in the summer of 2011, we moved to a physical environment. So some of you may see these hardware specs and think that we're a little crazy, but I want to point out that these are the minimum specs for a blade that we could put into our data center at the time, so we didn't really have a choice. And so if we wanted dedicated resources to our Pharos environment, we had to go with these blades, and this is what we got. But it's overkill to run Pharos, but that's all we really could do. So we built the system in March of 2011 so we could deploy it in the summer of 2011 as well. We deployed compatible queues, which allowed us to keep labs and public printing separate, but still provide a consistent experience to all the users. They could print from their own devices and come into one of our facilities to release, or they could go into our facilities, print, and release there as well. The system also gave us a little bit of redundancy in case one server failed, we could at least keep some sort of printing up. We started the fall 2012 semester with the law school as our first client. This introduced 4 new changes. We upgraded to Pharos 8.3, we deployed Omega PS200s, we deployed RFID tap readers, and we had a different cost model for the law school. Over the summer, we had easily updated our feeds to now include RFID info, and we had been testing the RFID readers to make sure everything was good to go. We opened the semester, and everything was going smoothly. We were starting to upgrade our swipe readers to tap readers on our PS150s to make it easier for users. And then in October of 2012, Superstorm Sandy came along. In preparation of the storm, we had a phased shutdown of our data center. because one of our data centers is located in the flood zone. This ended up being low impact for us because the extreme power loss in lower Manhattan, NYU shut down, so there really wasn't much going on campus at that point. But it got us thinking of, what can we do to keep this up if something like this were to happen again. Many of our Tier 1 services had already been transitioned to a high availability redundancy model, but lower priority services like printing were still not transitioned. But after all this happened, we realized, we really need to figure something out. So over the fall as well, I was working with a team in Shanghai to get Pharos up and running there. We started the spring semester with Shanghai as a client of the NYU print service. At that point, it was just a matter of adding a new print server and modifying some firewall rules because we had our foundation already set. This was our first foray into support across time zones. We did over-the-phone training with the technical staff via TeamViewer to give them basic knowledge of how the system works and how they could provide basic support. Ultimately, the students in Shanghai were expected to dial into our service desk in New York City because that's 24/7. However, we didn't really have 24/7 support from the service team, which is me. So that's pretty much why. The library was our third client. As mentioned before, they had an existing Pharos setup, so we just took over all their equipment and integrated into ours. They had existing knowledge of Pharos, so training them was pretty straightforward. Integrating them meant that we were now working with Pharos workstations as well, and they were all still using swipe readers. Our terminal login scripts are configured to check for RFID, for swipe, for manual login, which we don't really use, so it wasn't a big deal to have them come on board. The two big changes were that students could now print using their NYU print grant at the library rather than being charged for every sheet, and now we had to start offering color printing. During the fall 2013 semester and into the spring 2014 semester, we added 4 new global sites. Before, with just Shanghai, we only had to worry about New York and Shanghai. But now we had locations in multiple time zones, which meant sharing support became increasingly important so that users could get support no matter where they were. We also began to focus on performance and trying to match it as closely as possible to the performance we had in New York, specifically with Sydney being a problem site for us. So this is our current infrastructure as of January 2015. Most of the work was completed in 2014 of the additional work. The big difference is that we now have a database cluster spread across 2 of our data centers, and we have a full-fledged dev environment. And lastly, Tel Aviv in the bottom right, which went live 2 weeks ago for the spring semester. So here are some specs for our existing infrastructure. But we now have redundancy to support our global sites. Our single points of failure now are the existing print servers themselves. Maintenance is now way more difficult because our maintenance window is in New York City, is based out of New York City, and patching is only done on the second weekend of every month. Since all the work is done out of New York, it can affect the sites during their busy times because it's all based on when we can do it in New York. So this next section is about rethinking our design to meet our global needs. So why do we need a global solution? We have 3 main campuses and 11 study abroad sites. Our goal is to provide our users with the same experience no matter where they go. This includes look, feel, support, and functionality. We need to know that no matter what time it is anywhere in the world, our service is going to be up for them. So how are we achieving this? We switched to a site license, which made deploying devices way faster. We no longer had to wait to get a new license, to get approval and all that on funding, so we could add a new device. We've standardized on hardware, which makes support easier and provides the user with a consistent experience. We test. We test in our development environment. We've used latency generators to test performance, to mimic sites abroad. Anything that could come up as an issue connecting to our Blackboard gateway, anything like that always gets tested. We phased our global deployments by allocating a certain amount of time to each one so we could stand up the environment, test it, declare it live, monitor it, and then move on to the next one. And we've partnered with other support groups around the university to share support. This means that if you're in London, someone can give you basic support or provide you with the information on how to get support from New York City. This is the case for any of our sites. So, things that we still have left to do. The 3 sites that are listed in the first bullet, they're lacking basic NYU IT services like NYUNet, so we can't proceed with them until that infrastructure gets set in place. We're currently waiting on funding for mobile print, but once we get that, we're going to start a pilot program in New York City before we move on to a pilot program at one of our global sites, which hasn't been determined yet. We have a very limited off-the-glass presence in New York City, but there's interest in expanding that, especially at our global sites. And we're currently in the process of upgrading all of our SSL certs to SHA-2 certs from InCommon. We've installed them in our dev environment. We've had some issues with the Omegas. Our firmware upgrade for the PS200 seems to have solved it, but we currently have no working solution for our PS150s. But either way, we're looking at upgrading over 100 PS200s all over the world, firmware-wise, to get this to work. So, supporting something of this size can be a little overwhelming, and this is how we've addressed support. In New York City, we've partnered with departmental help desks to achieve a shared support model. We work with the law school and the library help desk to handle their respective clients. All other calls are directed to the NYU IT service desk. Our lab staff handles this role for our facilities in conjunction with the NYU IT service desk. For our global sites, there's a designated IT contact on each site, and everything on this list is handled by them, but generally most of these items are escalated directly. All additional support is pretty much handled by me. There's support from our finance team for license renewal and our systems teams for server hardware and software support. And this is how we manage to share support as well. We're using ServiceNow as our ticketing system and for our knowledge base, and so this allows us to share service tickets across groups easily. We're responsible for creating and maintaining our own knowledge base articles for the service. We have our NYU print service webpage, which links to all of our pop-up installers, as well as providing links to our database and basic service information. We've created posters for our tag print release campaign for all of our global sites, and these pretty much just documented the steps needed to use the service. And then we've customized our Omega backgrounds to show how to use the Omega, and then we've customized the error string so that when a user does have an issue, it gives them the name of the Omega, and it provides the service desk number so they can call right there and say, I'm at terminal number, whatever, and this is the problem I'm having. For training, we use Google Docs heavily. We use Google Docs heavily, which allows us to have everything in one location, updated in one location, and easily share it out to anyone who needs access. And we do in-person trainings with these support desks for Pharos Remote and for Pharos Reports. So, as with any service that we offer at NYU, metrics are very important for us. We do a lot of reporting, and we have 2 ways to do it. We can use the Pharos reports, or we can use our own custom reports. Pharos reports we use primarily for client-facing reports. So if a student says, I want to know how much I printed, or they're contesting a charge or whatever, we can print out their transaction history and send it off to them in a PDF, and they're satisfied with that. But for our internal reporting, that's no good. And so we rely solely on our custom reports that we're also using PHP and SQL for. So this is a sample of overall usage for the month of December. And I don't know how clear those numbers are. But the top half is a breakdown of our user groups. And then the bottom half, in this case, is a specific printer, and then has the breakdown of by group of how much printing has been done on that specific printer. And this report is, a ton of pages long, but each device is broken out like that. And so, in case you guys can't see, for the month of December, we did a little over 2 million pages or 2 million sheets printed across our whole system. So this is a report for a department, in this case our residence halls. And so at the top you can see that it's broken down by residence hall. And again, the number of users that have submitted jobs within any of the printers, how many jobs went through, how many sheets, how many pages, and at the bottom we have it grouped out by the specific printers in that group. And the way we're handling this is we're using the description field in Pharos to put, in this case, RES for residence hall, and then we can report on that. And so for the labs, we have LAB, for classroom, CLAS. And so that's how we can group printers quickly and report on it. So how do reports help us? I think this list is probably the same for everybody here, but showing us usage, allowing us to see where there might be more printers necessary, less printers necessary, who's printing, how much they're printing, how much funds we're generating, and anticipating future growth. So, conclusion. A consistent experience, a user experience for us is very important. Not only that, but it makes supporting this way easier if we know exactly where people are, what they're using, and what problems they may be having, no matter where they are. It just makes it easier to support. Users can submit jobs from their personal devices or from our devices, and they're held for up to 24 hours. And it's not unusual for us to have 3,000 to 4,000 jobs across our queues at any given time. And we've developed a workflow for managing our users that works pretty well for us. These are the things that can be improved on. But the biggest thing is the maintenance across time zones, because there's really no way to get around this with the limited maintenance windows that we're given in New York City, and with all our global sites. There's really no way to make everybody happy. And lastly, we also need to improve our 24/7 service support. So the students, as I said, they can call into our help desk 24/7, 365, and they'll take that call, they'll submit a ticket, but that back-end support of me, I guess, it's currently not working as well as it should. And lastly, service partner integration. We're dependent on other systems, so if a system fails, it's going to cause problems for us, whether it's Blackboard, our registry feed, the network, the card center, badging system, anything like that will cause issues for us. So in summary, we knew that we needed a strong foundation, and we made sure to get that right from the start. With the strong foundation, we were able to quickly re-architect our infrastructure and making minor changes and just move that foundation from one place to the other. We've done a ton of documentation. We document everything. We have step-by-step documentations on how we installed our system in 2009. We have documentation for the support desk on how to telnet to a port on the server for troubleshooting if necessary. And we have it all in Google Docs so we can easily share it with anybody who needs access to it. The Pharos database has a wealth of information. You just need to know how to find it and where to find it, and then eventually what to do with it. And we know that our infrastructure can be improved. Our users change, their needs change, and we have to make sure that we're ready to change with them wherever they may be. So thank you, Chris and Stephen, Track Systems, Stephanie at Pharos, for all your support.